Well, good Sabbath. Turn with me, if you will, to Ecclesiastes. Again, we're going to take a break from Hosea because I've been on the road all week. I went into my files and found a sermon that either hasn't been preached in a while or that I've done an outline for and have in my files. And today we're going to kind of do a survey of the book of Ecclesiastes. The focus of this book, written by Solomon, is the fact that Solomon looks at life under the sun from a human perspective. He talks about the futility of life, this life, and he talks about the fact that life is short. And because life is short, it makes it a very frustrating experience. Shakespeare, in his play Macbeth, shows us some insight into this frustration caused by the temporary nature of life. Macbeth and his wife are tragic characters whose ambition and sin lead them to be king and queen in Scotland. Macbeth and his wife have killed Duncan, the king, and have to live with the consequences of their action. Lady Macbeth cannot live with this thing they have, and she takes her own life. In his grief, Macbeth states the following, and I think it's a good summary of how human beings see life. He says, "She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools. The dusty way to death. Out, out, Greek candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that frets and struts his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, and signifying nothing." To Macbeth, life is extremely short, a mere hour. In the broad picture, it signifies nothing. It is meaningless. It is futile. The modern, or I guess ancient, folk singer Bob Dylan, in his work, "It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding," says it in this way. He says, "Suicide remarks are torn from a fool's gold mouthpiece. The hollow horn plays wasted words, prove to warn that he that's not busy being born is busy dying." It's a really bleak look at the world. This world under the sun. And so when we look at Ecclesiastes, we will find that it is very bleak and very dark because it is written from this human perspective of the frustratingly short nature of life. In chapter 1, verses 1 through 7, and on down into chapter 2, and we won't read all of it, but we will look at 1 through 7. Life is pictured as futile and meaningless. It says, "The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit a man of all the labor which he takes under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abideth forever. The sun also ariseth, and the sun goeth down, and hasteneth to his place where he arose. The wind goeth forth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returns again according to his circuits. All the rivers run into the sea, and yet the sea is not full. Unto the place whence the rivers come, thither they return again. Now I want to talk about some of the phrases and words in this book. 27 times the phrase "under the sun" shows up in this book. The sun is up here, humans are down here. It's all those activities that take place in that realm, that Solomon has in focus. The phrase vanity and vexation of spirit shows up 7 times. The word vanity is used 27 times. Labor, hard work. Labor is used is used 21 times, and the word evil shows up 21 times. So this isn't a warm and fuzzy book. Vanity here in this passage is used of the idea of emptiness, something transitory and unsatisfactory. It's as one wise man once said and wrote down in the book, vanity here is like reaching out and grabbing for a handful of wind. What do you get when you close your hand? Nothing. It's nothing. In verses 8 through 11, it says that all of our labors are futile because those that follow us won't remember what we've done. Let's take a look at verses 8 through 11. All things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The things that have been seen, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which will be done, or shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which was before us. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of those things that are to come, and those things that shall come hereafter. It's interesting. I spend my life in electronics occasionally. Do you know that the Egyptians made batteries? They took an acid and they took metals and they made in little clay pots batteries. There's nothing new under the sun. You know, we cannot even still, to this day, maybe in this last 20 years or so, they may have figured it out. But Damascus steel is one of the best steel's to hold an edge on a sword. And we don't even understand the process for making that steel. We still haven't figured it out. The Egyptians, I'll just use them again. If you like alcoholic beverages, they invented beer. We didn't. There is really nothing new under the sun. We rediscover truth. Maybe we have knowledge now and it expands, but a lot of times when we're expanding our knowledge, we find that somebody else knew that and wrote it down hundreds of years ago. We just rediscover things. And the reason we rediscover them is because, frankly, we didn't learn the lessons of the previous generation. We get ourselves involved in wars because we don't remember what happened before. We get ourselves in financial troubles as a nation because we don't remember what caused the Depression or the Great Panic. And we don't act upon those things. The reason we have troubles now are things that they knew and put laws in place to stop back in the 30s and 40s. And we decided to remove those laws, thinking they were no longer valid. Life is futile because we have short memories as human beings. Let's take a look specifically at verse 11. There is no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of those things that are come with those that shall come after it. I was at my son's yesterday. They had taken 708 family slides that I had, and they put them on a CD in JPEG form for me. I saw people like my grandmother, Lundstedt, and some others in those slides, and my son was displaying some of those slides along with mixtures of his family slides and some other things on his TV. It just kind of rolls by all the time. And frankly, I saw some people in those slides that I didn't know. Okay? Some people I didn't know. And I assure you that unless I had explained to them who my grandparents were, my grandmother and grandfather died when I was about 17 on my mother's side. My son and daughter-in-law and those would not have known. And they certainly don't know what kind of people they are. So we are forgetful. You know, Richard Nixon, when he was president, and he was toward the end of his time as president, was very worried about his place in history. He doesn't need to worry about his place in history. Why? Because we're forgetful. We're forgetful. Life under the sun is difficult. We want to give a heritage to our children and to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren if we live that long. But the world will little know, nor long remember, as somebody else one also once said, what we do here. I think that was Abraham Lincoln. What we say here. We are forgetful. In chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, let's take a look at that. I said in my heart, go to now, and I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doth it? I sought in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting my heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men, which they should do under the sun, or under heaven, all the days of their life. I made me great works. I builded me great houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruit. I made me pools of water to water therewith the wood and bring forth trees. I got me servants and maidservants, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great cattle and small cattle, above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the particular treasure of kings and of provinces. I gat me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great and increased more than that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from joy. For my heart rejoiced in all of my labor, and this was my portion of all of my labor. And then I looked at all the works of my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit. There was no profit under the sun. Solomon sought to get, to obtain, to have pleasure. But he found that all of this led to frustration. He tried work. He tried wine. He tried song. And they all failed him. The pleasures of this world are temporary, and they are not completely satisfying. This week I went to Arkansas, and I acted as program manager for my house because I need to repaint the house. I need to refinish the floors. I have a floor in the laundry room that needs to be repaired. I have to put insulation and a vapor seal under my house. I have a lot of things that have to be done before I can sell it. I attempted to get my International Scout 2, my 1975 International Scout 2 to start. And finally, Cindy told me to pray over it, and I finally decided it needs to have someone to lay hands on it, so I took it to the mechanic. But I assure you that Scout was running perfectly 4-5 years ago, the last time I drove it. And I assure you that the house was painted before I left it. And I had done such a wonderful job of painting it. It was a great job. And by the way, I have to reglaze all the yellow tile in my bathrooms too, so that they don't look like 1968 tile. I can remodel, refresh, repaint, regrout. I can do all of those things to my satisfaction. 5 years, somebody will have to do it again. That's what he's saying here. I get all these things. I've got songs on my iPod. You know, you can put a lot of songs on your iPod, along with Pastor Bill's sermons, by the way. But you can put a lot of things on your iPod. You know, I listen to probably 3 or 4 of the albums on there most of the time. And I keep putting more and more things on because I find pleasure in that music. But after a while, I turned on Willie Nelson's And the Road Goes On Forever the other day. And after about a song or two, I got tired of it and moved on. There was no pleasure in those things. And that's what Solomon is saying here. These pleasures in these things on this earth are temporary. Now, we've got a lot of collected things at our house in Arkansas. Collected things over the years. Some of them have sentimental value. And those sentimental value things I will bring back to Texas here shortly. But the rest of that stuff is just collected stuff. And I'm going, it was important to me at the time we got it. It was important to Cindy at the time we got it. And sometimes I have to convince both Cindy and myself that it's not really all that important anymore. If I haven't looked at it in 5 years, maybe it's something I ought to get rid of. But those things were important to me 5 years ago when I bought them. Or I collected them from some store somewhere. Or somebody's yard sale. I thought it was valuable to me at that time. But it really is frustration. So this week, while I was doing good things, I was kind of frustrated somewhat. Especially when the scout wouldn't start. And I had to see it get hauled off to the repair person again. And I've decided that as much as I love my old 1975 Scout, as much of a pleasure as it is to me, that when it gets running this time, I'm going to take pictures of it and send those pictures and a video of it running to the 2 Scout dealerships I have gotten parts from over the years and see if they will buy my 1975 Scout. Because I promise you, it hurts me to see it sit there and not start and the tires go flat. There's no real pleasure, no real ultimate satisfaction in those things under the sun. Let's take a look at verse 18 of chapter 2. Yet I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that should be after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all the labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. Children, you love them, but they're not you. I give to my children certain things. I have a carved bar that my mother bought in Guam. And her dad refinished it because it had gotten damaged when it shipped from overseas. I gave that to my son Carl. And the reason I gave it to Carl is because he will keep it and pass it on to the next generation. Some of the things I won't give Carl because Carl doesn't care about them. Something that's sentimental to me, something that's important to me, maybe my sons Eric and Carl, it's not important to them. My grandmother lived in Nebraska and South Dakota. And she has a teacup that has an Indian chief on it with a gold edge on it. My mother gave that to me. And I will give it to one of my sons who will appreciate it. But not everything that I have, that I treasure, are going to be treasured by those after me. And that is what Solomon discovered. He could build fine things. He could do great work. He could make great writings and great music. But within a generation or two, all that would be gone. But the next major point is Solomon's conclusion, based on his life under the sun, that it was meaningless. Let's look at his first conclusion there, still in chapter 2. Let's go down, 20 through 26. It says, "Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity, yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and great evil. For what hath man of all the labor and vexation of his heart, wherein he labored under the sun? For all of his days are sorrows, and his travail great grief. Yea, his heart hath taken not rest in the night. This also is vanity. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat, and that he should drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can hasten hereunto more than I? For God hath given to man that is good in the sight of wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he travaileth, to gather and to heap up, that he might give to him that is good before God. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit." And I'm not going to read this one, but it's chapter 3, 1 through 14. And it's Solomon's second conclusion. Everything in life has a proper time and place, and when it is done in order, it has beauty. But man in this life cannot comprehend God's ways. Now you might recognize there's a bird's tune in this chapter. Turn, turn, turn. All right, so Solomon's third major point here. This life under the sun is meaningless, but you should live properly because God will eventually reward good and evil. Now, if we were to read most of the rest of the book from chapter 3, verse 15 on through 12:12, we would discover this. I'm just going to point out several quick points here under this section. In other words, life is meaningless, but live properly, because God will eventually reward good and evil. In verses 3:15 through 22, he says, all men and beasts die. They are the same. So, enjoy what you have while you have it. In chapter 4, verses 1 through 16, and in chapter 5, verses 8 through 20, he tells people that there is no justice under the sun. In chapter 5, verses 1 through 7, he says, be careful and honest in your dealings with both God and men. Live this proper life. In chapter 6, 1 through 12, he tells us, like men and beasts all die, guess what? Rich and poor also die. In chapter 7, 1 through 29, he gives us a series of proverbs about living a proper life. In chapters 8, 1 through chapter 9, verse 18, he says that all good and evil will receive that just reward or punishment when this life is over. Therefore, live righteously and enjoy life. In chapter 10, verse 1, on through chapter 12 and verse 12, he gives us proverbs. He gives us proverbs to live in this vain world. This is how to live in a world under the sun that all is vanity in. All right, let's take a look at Solomon's conclusion to the book. Chapter 12. Verses 13 and 14. Solomon's lived this life. He's done all of these things. He's thought about all these things. He's come up with all these rich ideas, given us proverbs for living this life. And this is his conclusion. This life of vanity and vexation of spirit. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, and every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Everything we do in this life will eventually come to a halt, to a stopping place. All of our life's work and everything we do is somewhat futile and frustrating. Honestly, what Solomon is trying to say throughout this book is don't put your focus on the things you can gain, on the pleasures you can have, on the enjoyment that you can temporarily get from working hard, from the things you can collect. Solomon didn't believe in the proverb that's on the bumper sticker that I saw a while back that says that the person who dies with the most toys wins. because you got the toys, but you're dead. You don't get them. Somebody else. Solomon is telling us in his conclusion that we ought to live life to the fullest. He's not telling us don't enjoy music. He's not telling us don't enjoy wine. He's not telling us don't enjoy the pursuits of this life. But he is telling us to live our lives properly, decent, in order, with the understanding that this life is not all there is. It's as the Scripture says, put your eyes on things above. Keep your mind and heart looking for the future kingdom of God. Live life to the fullest. Live it abundantly. But live this human life with the recognition that it's all temporary and not that important. It doesn't matter if I go down to the Scout dealer after I've sold my Scout and buy me a completely restored model that drives fine. I'm not going to really gain anything in the long run by doing that. It doesn't really matter whether I get that convertible Mercedes-Benz I used to lust after when I was a young man. It really doesn't matter if I get to drive that Norton Commando motorcycle that I always wanted. And frankly, even if I got it and I drove it, the pleasure of it would fade. But what does matter is how I treat others, how I live my life. Because there is reward and punishment for every action. Those that I do that you know about, and those that I do that you don't know about. So I will leave you today with that verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Sister 9.